And hi again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Coin Conversations. I'm Coin Sports Director Adam Bjarnson, and I've got a great guest with us from up on the park blocks, a mighty Portland State Viking alum myself. We've got Mike Wilson. He is a mental performance coach and a professor up at Portland State. Mike, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Adam. It's absolutely a pleasure to be able to be on the network here, especially because this is our local community and sports is so meaningful here. So just to be able to participate in this conversation, it's an honor and a privilege. So thank you for having me.
Of course. And we love to give people a platform to talk about their expertise in a certain field. And sports psychology, it seems to be something very prevalent and needed as far as a career path. Tell everyone a little bit about who you are, where you came from, and why you chose to be getting into sports psychology.
Yeah, there are quite a few misconceptions about sports psychology, just in general. I mean, and there's a lot of reasons for that. It's a newer field in terms of the modern sport landscape, but sports psychology has actually been around for a couple of decades, especially internationally. It's been existing in Europe since about the turn of the 20th century. So far as I'm concerned, I'm actually born and raised here locally in the Willamette Valley from Salem. And so for me, having been an athlete and a competitor for all of my youth career, it's actually what ended up taking me on to my higher education. It's actually what afforded me so many excellent opportunities to be able to see other parts of the world, be able to see other cultures, meet other people, learn how to work within a team, learn about things like cooperation, communication, leadership, discipline, commitment. So life skills that are definitely translatable to whatever it is that you're going to eventually get into as an adult. And so for me, it was a very significant part of my education in terms of understanding not only what sport was about psychologically, like what goes on, but also too, how does my mind work and how does it work to my disadvantage? And sometimes how does it work to my advantage as well? Because when we talk about sports psychology, one of the misconceptions is that sports psychology is this field or is this thing that is only needed when things are wrong, when someone's having, let's say, a scoring drought, or when someone's motivation is low, or when someone's lacking confidence, or when a team is absolutely imploding from the inside out because of toxic, teammates, or because something has gone on in the organization. And that's just not the case. That's a very, very, very small part of sports psychology. For the most part, sports psychology looks at what are the ways in which performance can be enhanced through the mental side of the game. So really what we're looking at is taking psychological principles and applying them to sport context. And I should really actually put kind of like an asterisk there because it extends on to exercising context as well. So, working in gyms, working with athletic trainers, working with different types of organized community exercise programs, mental health programs, things like that. So it actually has quite a broad implication in that sense. But sports psychology is really focused on looking at the elements that can enhance a individual's performance, a team's performance, a coach's performance, even an organization's performance, like a professional sports club or an entire athletic department at a university. And so when we talk about things like enhancing performance mentally, now we're talking about things like how do we build confidence? How do we retain confidence? How do we insulate confidence? What moments can threaten our confidence and what moments are advantageous to our confidence? Can we recreate those moments? How can we avoid certain moments? Or same thing with motivation. What motivates an individual? What takes motivation away from an individual? Or what prevents an individual from being motivated to accomplish a goal? How do you communicate with other people? Do you communicate emotionally? Do you communicate with information? Are there certain instances in a performance in which you're less likely to communicate? Are there moments where someone is more likely to communicate, but when they are communicating, is it effective communication? Is it helpful communication? And this applies to coaches. This applies to the team members. This applies to the sports staff. Even something as simple as focusing. Right. This is something we hear all the time is, hey, just focus harder or just focus or get your head in the game, concentrate. But there's really no template as to how to do that. And so what we see is that, very successful performers, very successful athletes that end up playing at the highest levels is they have more or less figured out a way to make it work for themselves. They are self-taught to a very high degree, but that's not the case for the general population. And so we train things like tactics, we train things like technique, we train things on the diet and nutrition. We especially have training in what was called strength and conditioning, where we build the body. Now we have data science and analytics and all of this information, but still one of the overlooked aspects of performance is the mental side. And for the viewers and for your listeners here, the way I try to illustrate it is if you think of a bicycle wheel, right? And a bicycle wheel has all these spokes attached to it, okay? Well, what's the purpose of those spokes? The purpose of those spokes is to support the wheel so that the bike can have momentum so that it can move forward, right? So the bike is your organization or your club or your business. But each one of these spokes represents that strength and conditioning. Maybe another one of the spokes represents the tactical side of training. Another one of those spokes represents the diet and nutrition aspect of training and the athletic the rehab and the athletic training and getting your taping and your exercises and all that stuff. Mental performance is a spoke alongside them. And it is just as important because whoever has a brain, there's psychology. Decisions are being made, thoughts are being thought, feelings are being felt. But in terms of how those are all processed and how those are all experienced and interpreted and appraised from other people interpersonally with your teammates or your coaches is entirely unique to the individual. And so we're looking at the individual differences in terms of the gene environment interaction and how someone's social life and environment has affected the way they think, to think in a particular way. That's something we call culture. And even within our Portland metro area, we have different parts of the city that all have a different bit of a flavor. And so we see how that can kind of play into this idea of sports psychology. And performance enhancement. And then as we go through the conversation, I'll break a lot of that down too in a much more, digestible form, because there's some very easily applicable ways in which you can realize this idea of sports psychology, no matter what no matter what your level of competitive level is, no matter what sport you're playing, no matter what age you are, there's something for everybody to be gained from it.
Well, let me ask you this, because, I'm going to speak from just my own personal life. I've got an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 6-year-old. And usually in the summertime, we're thinking, oh, this is great. There's going to be time. We're going to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And now the kids are all cooped up in the house. It's this post-COVID world that we're still, I think, adjusting to. And I'm trying to find a ground for all of us to be able to play on and get along. And again, so I'm just curious from a sports psychology or just a psychology period alone without the sports aspect, like how do you navigate these waters in this post-COVID world when there was so much change? Do you see a lot of that at all?
Yeah. And one of the things that I like to refer to is this idea called the growth versus fixed mindset. It's been quite a popular term within the sports psychology world, but it hasn't quite gotten out to the greater public in general. But what this idea of growth and fixed mindset is that the growth-minded individual essentially is someone that says, look, my abilities and my traits and who I am isn't fixed. And, in comparison and contrast to that, the fixed mindset individual says that the skills that I have, the talents that I have, the abilities that I have, they are finite. I was born with them. They're what I got. I can't, develop any other ones. I can just keep these skills that I have and these talents that I have. And I'm going to get really good at these and protect these and tie my identity to that as well. And so why that is significant in this context is because when we tie our identity to what we do, that is what we call then a performance-based identity. And so what that looks like then is if I do well at something, then the feedback and the response is that then I'm a good person. I'm good. My value is good. Whereas if I don't achieve something or if I fail at something, I'm a bad person, because that tends to be the feedback and the response that you get. And so for yourself, you're tying your identity to that. And with younger individuals, especially if personality differences, and then depending on the competitive levels that they're at, this can also create some type of foreclosure of identity as well. So you'll see 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds locked into this identity and see this stunting happening of personal growth. What I call self-actualization. And what's really fascinating about this idea of a growth versus fixed mindset is what I think is it really comes down to this idea of this age-old debate versus nativists and constructivists. And essentially, nativists say that you're born with it. They're the people that say you got it or you don't. Those all fall along the fixed mindset side of things, right? And I'm going to explain why that's important here in a minute. Because the constructivist says that, well, skills and abilities are built. People can change, people can learn. And we believe in that because of what was called neuroplasticity. It was discovered a little over 100 years ago by a Spanish neuroscientist. But this idea of neuroplasticity now shows in brain scans, and the research is substantial with this idea of neuroplasticity, but it's this idea that we can rewire neural pathways in the brain. Okay, so why that matters then is because if you're someone that believes in the in the natural talent idea, and that you're either born with it or you don't, you have it or you don't. If you have to try at something, then you must not be good at it. You probably shouldn't do it, right? Yeah. If it doesn't come easily to you, then it's not for you, right? That's the kind of mentality there. Well, the problem with that, one of the many problems with that mentality and that mindset then is that, well, what we'll see is that when challenges present themselves, challenges are viewed as a threat. Because if you don't succeed at what you're good at, what does that say about you as a person? Yeah. If your identity is tied to that, and socially speaking, your relationships have tied you to that identity. And if you're a professional athlete and you've got a contract tied to that identity, right, there can be some serious implications for that. Even further is when you have this naturalist or nativist mindset, when you do face challenges, you are much more likely to quit. Okay. Because what's the point? Yeah. It's not you've got nothing to prove, right? And
quit probably sooner rather than later too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Some will just do it one time and go, forget it. I know I'm not going to be good at this. Yeah. I'm curious about the mental skills training. Like, say someone's listening to this and go, oh, I can relate to that. I can relate to this. What are some skills that people can do at home by themselves to better their psychological acumen, if you will?
Yeah. One of the first things you can do is identify your explanatory style. Now, what is your explanatory style? Essentially, so it comes from this gentleman from back in the mid 90s, and he is the person that coined the term learned optimism. If you've ever heard that term before, this is where it comes from, a man by the name of Martin Seligman, a Stanford psychologist. And why this would be a great skill for somebody to be able to use right away is because our explanatory style is our way in which we explain what happens to us, right? So mindset is how we think about ourselves. Mindset is our self-esteem. Mindset is who we think we are in this world and what it means to be us. You know, who are we as a human being? But explanatory style then is how we explain what happens to us. So number one, when we look at events in our lives, good or bad, that happen, okay? The first question we have to ask ourselves is this permanent or is this temporary? That's the first distinction you want to make for yourself is this situation, is this circumstance permanent or is it temporary? Okay. Yeah. The second part of that is you then want to identify, is this circumstance pervasive or specific? Meaning, is it going to happen a lot in a lot of different ways? Is there no escape from it? Or is this just a one-time, one-hit wonder? Okay. Yeah. The third step to that is then identifying, is it something that is personal, that is coming from me, or is it something that's external, something coming from outside of me? Yeah. Okay. And why those three questions are important, okay, is because the fixed mindset individual will say something that's permanent instead of temporary. For example, I'm terrible at this forever, or I'm always going to be bad at this, or I'm never going to get good at this. Okay. Yeah. That's permanent. That's a permanent way of thinking, which is not founded. Okay. Then secondly, if it's pervasive, then you would say things like, it's always going to be like this, or no matter what I do, the result's always going to be the same. Yeah. Okay. And then personal.
You sound like a child of mine, by the way. They're always like that. It's like the woe is me factor, right? It's just like, no, get up, try it again. You can ride this bike, kid.
Yeah. Well, and so what's so important about that, though, Adam, is what's so important about that conversation right there, that interaction that you get to have with your child, is what is being reflected in that conversation is environment. Okay, because environment will reinforce those attitudes. Yeah. Right. And so whether that's a school environment, whether that's their social group, whether that's the greater environment of our nation or of our Western hemisphere at large, that does play a role in what is being validated, what is being reinforced, what is being emphasized. And this plays perfectly into the conversation because this is the kind of environment that coaches get to set up as they're setting up right now in training camps, right? Yeah. Some coaches are making soup, right? Soup is flexible. Soup, you can add in ingredients. Soup is evolving, right? That's your growth mindset. Okay. We are here's the guarantee, Adam. Here's the guarantee is you are going to have challenges. Your children are going to face adversity, period. No matter what. Okay. The question then is, well, how are they going to respond to that adversity? Yeah. That's the question. And how they respond to it is going to be dependent upon what is already planted in their brain, the way they think about the world. Okay. So for example, with their explanatory style, if you have somebody that's saying that they, when things go well, right. They say, oh, well, that all came from within me. I made that happen. Right. Yeah. The funny thing is with that attitude, what research shows more times than not is that the opposite of that attitude then is that when things go wrong, you don't assume any responsibility. Yeah.
Sounds all too familiar.
All too familiar, right? And then I'm going to add another one there too. When someone has luck as an explanation, you are also much more likely to quit when things get tough. You are also much more likely to not seek out challenges. And guess what, Adam? Challenge is growth. So that's a real issue there, especially if we're talking about athletics, which is a platform and a great subversive tool for teaching these things like personal development and discipline and commitment and persistence and perseverance and courage and bravery and things like that. Yeah. Whereas if you have an explanatory style that says, look, this event in part came from me, and I can recognize where my responsibility is in that so that I can be better prepared for next time.
I don't know who it was who coined the phrase, but it just came to my attention as we were telling me this, because there's so much. It's like, win at all costs, do this. Winning isn't everything. It's the only thing. I think it was Vince Lombardi. These are just quotes that are pasted throughout locker rooms everywhere. How do you get that through to, it's interesting. We were following the Murray Hill Little League team that was one win away from going to the Little League World Series. And, you see the tears on these kids' faces, and you're like, oh man, they're just so precious and, young, and, they don't know any better, but they lost. And to them, that was everything. So how do you get them to break that barrier of, like, it's not always about winning. It's about being great sportsmanship and, all the things that go along with it.
That is a brilliant observation, and I really wish.
Thank you. I'll take a bow.
I really hope at one day that more individuals take that more critical eye at what's going on in terms of the cultural landscape of youth sport. But that messaging comes from somewhere. Yeah. And we have to pretty much just look further down the road at where that messaging does come from, because sport is an industry. And working at some of the highest levels of sport, there very much is a business agenda. There very much is a goal line that you have to cross. Otherwise, people might lose their jobs. Mm-hmm. And that kind of filters down from coaches wanting to be able to keep their jobs and to be able to be successful at their jobs as well. And so there's a cultural system that is at play here with these individuals. Now, within the individual athlete, what their aspirations are, what their goals are, that's all going to have a different subjective experience with these kids. But as parents, coming alongside your kid in those types of moments and being sure to acknowledge the individual and not the performance is paramount. Yeah. You have to be able to distinguish the human being from the performance, right? Because that you're talking about the age that I mentioned is so critical, where this foreclosure of identity happens in elite youth athletics. Because now this is where not only the parental pressures come in, right? But now you've got these kids that are making these insane sacrifices for travel ball. They're putting their bodies at risk for harm down the road because of the exposure they're putting their bodies in. So those are all real things. But as parents, if that is what your child's goal is that if that is what they are trying to accomplish, then they're getting that messaging from the sport itself. There's no need to be able to address that or add to that. For the parents' perspective, it's about addressing the child and being there for the child in that capacity, making sure that they have the emotional reinforcement that they need, making sure that they have the social support that they need, because this is the journey that helps them begin to start building what is called emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. And by building this awareness and knowledge about emotional intelligence, that then empowers them in years down the road to be able to be more effective at regulating their emotions, when you won't have maybe these breakdowns or blowouts or end of the world moments. Because when we're going up and down like this, that's not conducive to any performer. And the research shows that with hormone profiles and exposure to stress, and when the body is over aroused for chronic or extended periods of time. So really, it's it's the youth's best interest to be as even keeled as possible, which means it's in the parents' best interest to keep that child as even keeled as possible.
Ah, look at all this. This is just great information. Hey, listen, you and I could talk literally for hours. I'm gaining so much, and we have been doing this for 24 minutes and 37 seconds. So
wow.
I know. Unfortunately, we got to close it up because this is how the news world works. But Mike Wilson, a professor at Portland State, sports psychologist, mental performance coach. I learned so much from you already just today and listening to you. I could listen to you forever. But Yeah, thank you for all the insight. This was great information, and we'll do it again soon. You don't go anywhere. I just have to roll the close out on this. So, Mike Wilson, thank
Will
you.
do. Thank you, Adam. Thank you.